Hey guys, welcome to our YouTube channel. This is all about documenting how we're building our own Barndominium. I am not a professional construction worker, carpenter by trade. I'm an aviator, and this channel is all about showing you guys how you can build your own Barndominium. What you see behind me is a timber frame porch that we just finished up, and I want to show you guys how we did that DIY style. Okay, the last bit of timbers here we are offloading. These are the actual trusses for the porches. This came from Timberworks out of Boone. Super nice people, great to work with. And I had not seen any of this product up until they were delivered. So this is my first time seeing them as we unwrap them. But I was sweating bullets getting these off the trailer because I didn't want to damage them. First time for me running a telehandler of this size. So we just take my time, went slow. It seemed that the visibility was a little better as I extended the forks out, so we decided to extend it out to pick them up, and then for stability purposes moved them back in before we moved. But it worked out really well. Big thank you also to Belle Logistics for the delivery. Super nice guy, and yeah, highly recommend him. Timberworks gives you two options for these trusses. You can either have them shipped disassembled or you can have them shipped assembled. We decided to have them shipped already assembled. One less thing we have to do. It's just as easy to finish these things once they're assembled as it would be to finish them and then assemble them. Saves a lot of time and manpower as well. And we had the equipment to move these. They came in at around 800 pounds according to the paperwork for the trusses. So they're pretty beefy, pretty heavy. A lot of that, of course, is going to depend on how dry the lumber is. But that's the number we were given. So they're pretty sizable. Here's a quick up-close look at the trusses before they're finished. Again, this is all Douglas fir lumber. Yeah, I don't even know if this is really needed, but oh yeah, there's a little bit of dust on it. Yep.
Oh, get some oil on there. I want to see it for next time.
Me too. All right, we have our first timber frame up on our sawhorses. Step one is to clean it. We've used compressed air to get the sawdust off and wiped it down. Now we're going to put the finishing oil on. We're going to give you guys the first look at this. This is Heritage Natural Finish. It's not a stain, it's purely just an all natural oil. Wow. Man, it's too bad you guys can't smell this stuff. It smells really good. We've spent the last couple of days fighting the weather, but we have all of the timbers for the front porch oiled, ready to put up. So we are going to get our post bases set, and we have everything marked out. It's time to drill these holes. All the hardware that you see in this video came with the timbers. We're pre-drilling a hole here for a 1-inch threaded rod that goes up into the post bases. I pre-drilled a pilot hole, and then I come back in with an 1.125" bit on my Bosch Bulldog Extreme hammer drill. This is the max size bit you can get for an SDS Plus drill. Had no problem handling it. I use the block here to keep my bit going straight. It's a little technique I use just so I know that my hole is going in nice and plumb, so when we put that rod in there, it's going to stick up nice and level, or I should say nice and plumb. Make sure you clean out your holes. We're going to epoxy these bolts in, so you don't want any dust in your holes. I'm brushing it out with a wire brush on a drill, using lots of air to clean out all the dust. You want that epoxy to grip that side of that concrete. The epoxy, you get it flowing. It's a 2-part deal, so there's 2 parts in a mixing nozzle here, and you just get it going until the color is, in this case, it's like a black-gray color. And once you get a uniform color, you can go ahead and start filling your hole about 2/3 of the way full, and then insert the 1-inch threaded rod. It needed to go 6 inches into the hole. We drilled the hole 6.5 to give us a little extra room, and you just kind of twist it as you go in. And I will tell you, this is my first time using this high strength epoxy. It sets up quick, so don't waste time doing this. Get it in there, get your rod set, get it level, and then leave it go. It's all set and cured in about 45 minutes, and you can feel the chemical reaction because it gets warm as it starts to harden. So we get both threaded rods inserted in. And now that both of the rods are inserted, I just want to stress it's very important to get these placed accurately, because when the truss goes in at the top of the post, if these are off and the bottom of the post base is too wide, you're not going to be able to get your post plumb with the truss. So it's critical. Take your time, double check, retract, quadruple check these things. Make sure you have your rods in the right spot for your posts. It'll make things much easier. All right, and now we finally get to assemble these timber frame porches. I really looked forward to this, and this was the most fun I've had on the project. It was just a blast getting these things put together and set up. What we're doing here is picking up a plate beam, a lower plate beam that sits on top of the post. We're going to set the post first, and then this plate beam goes on top of it. Being the weather was iffy all week, we didn't want the post standing there unsupported for too long in case weather moved in. So we wanted to get this plate beam in position, ready to go. Once the post is set, we can go ahead and drop this in on top of the post. And you'll see when we set the post, it has like a fin at the top, and this plate beam has a notch that fin goes up into and locks those 2 pieces together. And that plate beam then goes back to the 2x12 headers that we installed earlier on the house and gets all tied in. This is a little bit tricky, getting these posts in on the post bases. It's a hole on the bottom of the post that sits right down into a tube on that threaded rod. And now we get this plate beam hoisted up and get it in position. And you'll see here we make a little bit of a mistake. Little learning curve. We tied off the end of this plate beam right over the hole that the post needs to go up into. So once we realized that, we thought, oh shoot, let's set it down and retie it. But that's live and learn, I guess. First time doing this, and you don't think about every little detail. It was pretty windy this day that we set these. And with the weather the way it was all week, it just rained all week long. So we were trying to do things in between showers and not get soaked. And I also had a little nub on the fascia here. I had to cut it off a little shorter. Wasn't sure where it needed to be when we put the house up and did the overhangs, so I left it long. We cut it off, and then you have to come up here and move this strap, unfortunately. But again, just live and learn. It's part of DIY projects. So we just slide it down here to give us access to that slot. And you can see the fin on the top of the post. And that's where it locks into that plate beam. So we get it up here again. And I think, if I remember right, I have to shave off a little more on that fascia board. We just couldn't get this plate beam straight out to the post. It was like 3/4 of an inch or so that it stuck out. And there you see it kind of roll over, which is a pain. Luckily these were small enough that I could twist it back and get it set in, but This took us a little bit to get it set, but we learned. And I think when we get the second post and plate beam set, we cut our install time down in half, just from learning by doing this. And there it goes, right it on top. And this is where we realize that we can't get it straight, and I believe I have to notch out a little more of that fascia board, put a little slack in the hoisting lines. And taking some measurements here and getting our post nice and plumb. And I believe, yeah, just getting some measurements. A lot of discussions. You'll see this throughout the video. And I had to do a lot of editing to cut things out because it's a lot of us standing around talking, deciding about how to do things, how to get this all together. I mean, we've never done this before, so first time for everybody. But I do think it goes to show, and this proves as you watch more of this video, that you don't have to have experience doing this. Harmony Timberworks does a great job of sending you install instructions and a step-by-step guide on how to put this stuff together, and it takes all the guesswork out of it. And I think we did a pretty good job of having the house prepped the way we wanted, which is nice. We didn't struggle too much with that, luckily. And I think we're getting close here. To having it where we want. We just put some marks so if something moves, we can get it back. And once that's fastened down, you can kind of see the angled board we have out there to kind of hold it in place. Just some temporary angled bracing. And we get the second post set, and you can see here this goes a little bit smoother. I mean, after all, we're experienced, right? We got one post and beam set. Shoot, it was a lot of fun though. Get it set, get our post plumb, and then we drive some screws in on the back side. I actually put some ears and sandwich the butt end where I am right now up in there. Sandwich the timber in between some ears, just like we did for the trusses. And we just screw everything off kind of temporarily until we get pretty confident on they are where we want them to be. And what you don't see on this video is after we get everything up, we take a lot of measurements to make sure we're where we need to be. And just a little side note on this, take a measurement on your trusses and leave your plate beams or your posts angled out just slightly. Maybe we had them about an 1/8 inch bigger, the gap bigger than the width of the truss, so we knew it would go down in. And then you have bolts, and you'll see later on in the video, to suck the posts tight and get them back into a plumb position. It seemed to work out really well. We did that both with the front and the back porches, and worked out nice. And here we go. I'm sticking that ear up in there, in between those 2x12s. So the plate beam is sitting on top of the outer 2x12, and it's anchored to the side of the post, and it's anchored to this ear to prevent the back end from kicking out. And it seemed like a really solid connection. There wasn't anything on any of the blueprints that detailed how to do this. It was just left up to others. So we really had a lot of freedom on how we wanted to do this. But along with that comes lack of guidance as well. So with post frame being kind of unique in our area where we're at, I think this was a good solid way of doing it. We get our angled brace up there so the post can't kick out left or right. And notice too, we didn't put any bracing. We didn't have to put any screws or lags or nails in any of the posts other than the very top, which you'll never see. So you don't have any holes in any of the wood that's visible once this project is done. Which to me was important because, this stuff is expensive and prefer not to have a bunch of nail holes and screw holes in it as you're using your temporary bracing. Take our straps off and we're done. Up close look at the post base. These are adjustable. They have a plate underneath with a nut here, and we can adjust the height on this to get our plate beam up here level all the way across. So that's what we're going to do right now. Top of the plate beam. Makes that completely adjustable. Once you get your post plumb and your plate beam level, then it's time to lock down your bases. And all you do is line up the hole that's on the pipe on the threaded rod in the post that the post is actually sitting on, and you drive this pin through it and it locks everything down on the base so it can't twist and move up and down. I go a little bit easy on this too to start, just because I don't want to damage anything, but drive your pins a little bit past flush so you have room for your wood plugs later on down the road. There you can see we get the second base adjusted, get the holes to line up, drive in your pin, and you're all done. Once the bases are locked down, then it's time to go back up to your post and plate beam connection and drive in your wooden pins. The holes should be lined up. That fin that goes up in there has the hole, receives it, and you just knock your pins through. And this is the last step before you fly in your trusses. Little trick for putting these angled pieces in. Don't put your wood peg in your hole too soon. We have a piece of rebar going through there, which gives us flexibility when we drop that truss down on top. So, little trick. And this is probably the most exciting part of the whole project, is dropping these king post truss in. I was just a mixed bag of emotions here. A lot of excitement, but I was also very nervous at the time. These things are 800 pounds, so it's a lot of weight up there swinging around. 800 pounds, it's 24 feet wide and about 6 feet tall. You can see we had it hooked up to the telehandler here with some chain hoists, and the only reason we did that was to help give it a more controlled descent into the slots. The telehandler, you can feather it a little bit and be kind of smooth with it, but every once in a while it just kind of jumps, and as the hydraulics move things. So we just thought it would be safer to put these chain hoists on. If you're a follower on the channel and you watch us set the trusses on the main structure of the house, we used kind of the same technique and really liked the way it worked. It's just a nice, slow, methodical descent down. It takes a few extra people to set these trusses because you got to have some guys on the ground running the hoist. And there you can see my father-in-law running the chain hoist on one side, and my daughter helped as well. Kind of got everybody involved in this process. But leaving those plate beams just about 1/8 of an inch wider than what the actual truss is allows it to slip in there smooth. It's got about 1 inch notch on each side that it kind of slips down into, so you got plenty of meat underneath the truss, even with it spread out 1/8 of an inch. You got plenty of meat for that truss to come down and set down on top of. The other thing you just have to remember is your knee bracing there. Just make sure you get it pushed up in the hole as you lower the truss. But this went super, super smooth. I just can't even express how excited and happy I was that thing slid down in there nice and smooth. Once you get it in, then you can suck everything back to plumb and get your plate beams tight up against the butt ends of the heels on your trusses. There's a big 1-inch threaded rod that goes through there with a wedge pin that kind of holds everything together, and you just take a wrench and lock it down. Now, the one thing we did run into with this is the bolts were a little bit long, or the threaded rod was a little bit long, so it actually stuck out the side of the plate beams. So I had to take a Sawzall and cut those off smooth so we could hole plug them later. Okay, the last piece of the puzzle here is the ridge beam. We had a little bit of an issue here. It just had a little bit too much slack in order to get it up and over with the telehandler. Having the man lift was really nice as well, because you're going to have to do a lot of work where this drops into the top cord of the truss. You can see it's notched out there on the one end. That needs to drop into the notch on the top of the truss. And what we ran into here, I don't think is probably normal. The timbers have been sitting outside at this point for several days, and we've had rain every single day. Some days it was pretty much raining all day. So we did our best to keep these things covered and to keep the moisture off of them, but I think we still had some swelling, and this the notch on the plate, or on the ridge beam here, and the notch in the top of the truss, I think they were both swollen just a little bit. So we had some difficulty getting it dropped down in there and getting it to seat properly just because of that. So you'll see us here on this video. We take our dead blow hammer up top and try to hammer it down a little bit. And I actually had to take my oscillating cutoff tool and kind of shave some areas at the top to help get that drop down in. But for the most part, it should be a fairly easy process. Again, I just think because we had so much rain and so much wet weather and humidity, the timbers had just swollen up from being on the ground. I think we had over 5 inches of rain within the first couple of days of this week where we were setting these. So, I mean, it was just kind of really abnormal for us to have that much rain in a short amount of time. But again, the chain hoist makes it nice. You can just kind of slow descent and drop it right down in. We put a 2x6 post on the back. It sits right over top the truss for the house, and it's all lagged and anchored. I forget how many plies we ended up having there. I think it's like a 5-ply 2x6 post with some OSB in there to pad it out to fit that beam. But it seemed to work really well. It was a really solid connection. That post drops all the way down and sits on those 2x10, that 4-ply 2x10 girder. If you watched the previous videos, we built those girders and stuck them in between the posts there to help carry the weight. And really, to be honest, the timber frame, or the timber on the ridge, is only a 6x10, and it's only like 9 feet long, so it really didn't weigh that much. I was really surprised at how light that was. But here you see us kind of struggling to get it in to that notch. The other thing you have to think about too when you're dropping this in, it has to go in level. It can't be twisted, and you see me kind of picking up the back end here and trying to get it to a level spot here so we can get it down nice and smooth. It ends up going, but again, it just, I think because of all the rain, man, we struggled with this. We probably worked on this for an hour and a half to 2 hours, maybe even a little bit longer to get it to drop in there. And my battery is getting a little bit low at this point, so we're going to move on to the next phase here and go to the back side of the house. I promise you this thing does go in eventually. We just had to do a little bit of fiddling with it to get it to fit. We're getting ready to do our third post base, and this is what the manufacturer has. This is a threaded rod that goes inside this plate. The post actually sits down on top of this, and you can adjust your height with this. This bottom portion gets epoxied into the concrete, so we're going to finish drilling these 2 holes and get the back porch all set with these. Let it set up overnight and hopefully set timbers tomorrow. Here's a look at the process for the back porch. It's identical to the front porch, so we just use the same steps and procedures back here that we used on the front porch. The only difference between the 2 porches, the front porch is 8 feet deep and this back porch is 16 feet, so the plate beams obviously are a little bit longer, and the ridge beam is a little beefier than the front side. I think the front side was a 6x10 and this one back here is a 6x12. But really the process doesn't change. The truss is exactly the same. It all fits together exactly the same, and worked out pretty well. The terrain back here is a little bit more complex than the front side. It's pretty level on the front side. We're on the back side of the hill here, so we have to work with a little bit of an incline once you get off the patio area, and you can see the concrete piers are up out of the ground a little bit more than they are in the front. We have to bring in some more dirt here eventually to bring things up to the level that they need to be for final grade. But it really went smooth here on the back side. I think the lumber is still a little bit swollen from all the rains that we had, because we had to do a little bit of trimming for the truss and the ridge beam to get those to fit together nicely. But we did a bunch of measuring on the ground and did a little bit of shaving on the ground to take care of that, and that made the assembly go much smoother. Flying in the truss was a piece of cake. It was just like the front side. We left the post gap just a little bit, dropped it in, no issues there. The ridge beam worked out really well here. It's a little longer obviously than the front side, a little beefier, so you got a little more weight swinging around. And with the terrain the way it is, the telehandler was pretty much maxed out for this beam. Worked out just fine, but we were right at the limit there. And we learned a few things on the front side setting the beam, and we actually used the chain hoist and the telehandler to kind of get that beam level. And we built the post up in the back, had a little pry bar area, a little leverage area with some 2x4s there that Don's running to help me get this thing dropped into place. But I'm going to say half the time, maybe even a quarter of the time to get this in place compared to that front side. So we'll just kind of rip through this here. I'm going pretty fast speed-wise on this video, but I think you guys get the point. The main takeaways for me on this project is it's definitely a DIY doable project if you have some help, but you can't do it alone. Actually, a couple of guys, at least 3 I would recommend. The telehandler, in my opinion, is the must. Yeah, I don't know how these people did it back in the 1800s, putting this stuff up. It's just mind-blowing what they had to go through to get these timbers, the barns and stuff that they built back in the day. It's just crazy. I mean, I thought this was tough with the modern day equipment, but I can't imagine those folks getting things set without having all this stuff. It would have really been neat to see. But yeah, getting things as close as you possibly can early on with your foundations and planning, getting all that stuff, all the pre-preparation stuff done, and getting things as close as you can. And then this should go pretty smooth, which it did. Had we not had all those 4 or 5 days of rain after we took delivery, it probably would have went even smoother. But yeah, it all worked out. And I think it's very doable, at least from the package that I got from Harmony Timberworks. I want to thank those guys again. It was just a beautiful, beautiful thing here to get this done. Thanks for hanging out to the end of the video. Hopefully this shows you that you can DIY build a timber frame porch on your Barndominium. make it a little unique, give it a little something special, and jazz it up a bit. That's all I have for you guys today. We'll catch you on the next video.